Good morning, everybody, and afternoon for many of you. It is 8 a.m. in San Francisco today. Thank you for joining us for our webinar in partnership with Capgemini. It's called Building a Digital Banking Platform with APIs. And with me, I have Michelle from Capgemini, the head of UK Payments Practice. Before we dive into the intros, I'm going to briefly glance on our safe harbor statement, and then I will go over some logistics. Recording of and slides from this webinar will be made available shortly after the live broadcast. Questions can be submitted at any time through the questions button. Q&A will be at the end of the presentation, so we'll allocate about 10 minutes for that. If you have any questions afterwards, please don't feel free to ask. Reach out to www.mulesoft.com/ask where you can get in contact with one of our experts. So, introductions. Again, hi, Angie Lee Campos. I am the Financial Services Solutions Lead here at MuleSoft. I joined after about 10 years of management consulting experience at PwC's advisory banking and capital markets practice. I started during the financial crisis where my services started in resolution and receivership, then went into rebuilding the walls after the crisis, in the aftermath of the crisis, around enterprise-wide programs on compliance, data management, risk, M&A, and most recently digital transformations. Across all those years, the key theme there was always technology and how that technology shifted from a support function to now a unified business partner, driving strategy. So I'm very excited to be here today. And I'll let Michel give his introduction.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Angie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining that webinar. So I'm Michel Vaillat. I'm leading the payment practice for UK and Ireland. I'm based out of London. I'm basically having 15 years of experience working in the banking industry with, I would say, a clear focus on the payment-specific domain. As part of my responsibility, I'm obviously running the payment practice for Capgemini, meaning that I'm also delivering as an engagement executive some of the major payment engagements that we have in the region. I'm very happy today to share, I would say, our point of view on how the industry is moving to a new paradigm. I think Angie, we will trying to humbly give you guys some of the keys to decrypt the changes that are happening in the industry. And obviously, more than happy to, I would say, reply to your questions real time as far as we can, and happy to, I would say, take any conversation offline and explore a bit further with you your API journey.
So for the agenda, Michel will start with the market drivers and implications for banks and their customers. He'll also go over the new digital financial ecosystem, how market entrants have disrupted our value chain, and what that means to the old banking model versus what it looks like now. I will then talk through the opportunities that have been opened up through APIs and an approach to API-led connectivity, MuleSoft's point of view on building a digital banking platform. And then we'll close it off with Michel again going into the customer success story and best practices, approach, and guidelines on how to build that digital banking platform. Go ahead, Michel.
Thank you, Angie. Yeah. So the banking industry, you would say, as always, is facing multiple changes. Which is the today's reality. That industry is definitely put it under stress. On one hand, in terms of competition, so we see that more and more new players are entering the game. But on the other hand, the industry is also pushed in a continuous way to get more and more regulated, especially with a clear focus around the customer protection. And that's, I would say, the two key elements driving those changes. If we look a bit more into the details, what are those drivers in the end stimulating the entire ecosystem? There are actually four, and actually they are I would say, driven by the usual suspects, let's say that way. So the four key players, part of the equation there. So the very first one is obviously the regulator body. The regulator has been regulating the sector for decades now, always looking to improve, I would say, overall security, always looking to increase consumers' protection, and obviously, I would say, when you look at Europe, especially thanks to PSD1, trying to start stimulating the competition across the industry. On the other hand, the traditional banks, with the weight of the legacy, have been looking to, I would say, enhance their existing products and services, have been trying to create more value out of the existing legacy. Then comes obviously the customers. I mean, the whole ecosystem and the whole industry won't exist without customers and customers' expectations and requirements. Today's customers are definitely looking for a better user experience. They are definitely looking for more tailored made services. I think they like to have as much as possible services or product well matching with their individual expectations and requirements. And I think worth to mention, last but not least, the customers are also highly looking for a high level of security. I would say a high level of protection overall, which they consider as a key element of any value proposition they might be considering. And you'll see later why I'm highlighting specifically that point, because it's a very key one that might turn into a threat for the banks. And the last one, obviously, are those challengers, so those new players entering the game, looking for disruption, looking to leverage, let's say, their technological advantage. I'm talking especially about what we call the GAFA, so the Google, the Amazon, Facebook. So those big tech that have, I would say, hold the agility when it comes to the infrastructure, when it comes to the way of working that the banks don't have. And just a figure to realize also an aspect which is a competitive advantage that they have, which I would call the customer installed base. When you look at the number of customers those big tech have, it's amazing to realize, for instance, that Facebook has more than 2 billion active users using their service, which is, straight away giving them a scale advantage, and I think it's a good first figure to appreciate the danger for the banks having those companies exploring opportunities in the banking sector. All in all, open APIs, which is, I would say, the key topic for our webinar today, is probably one of the most disruptive and promising trends. There are many more, but this is probably the one which is in a very balanced way addressing most of the stakes that those players have at the moment. So basically what I said is there is clearly a strong push in terms of competition. The competitive landscape is being put at is being stretched, definitely. What does it mean for banks and customers? I think for end customers, it's good in the end. I mean, it brings more offers, it brings more products and services. With those players coming in, most of the time, it brings disruptive offers and services, and in the end, bringing value to them. I think it also, on top of that, has its mechanically extending, I would say, the choices out there. It gives also the ability to customers to be in a better position to properly benchmark the propositions that are there. Key question is obviously how much those new disruptive services products are replying to real needs and to real use cases. That's a key question that the industry will have to address. When it comes to the banks, it's obviously, I think, I already said that, it's obviously a threat. Considering the number of banking licenses application that have been raised globally since the beginning of this year, considering the number of new players entering the market, taking advantage of the new status introduced in Europe with PSD1 and PSD2, it's definitely many more actors coming in, and once again with, I would say, appetite to conquer market share, appetite to take a position in the end-to-end value chain. And this is where we see, I would say, the key consequence of that. The banks are going to be disintermediated and are already actually disintermediated, and the value chain is definitely disrupted. We'll see later on in the presentation a payment value chain illustration to make it more concrete. I think globally it's a risk for the banks. It's a risk obviously to lose customers. It's a risk for them to see their revenue decreasing. And I think it was to be mentioned, it's also in the end a risk over their reputation globally. And I think the risk is that the bank's reputation could negatively be impacted because discussing with the end customers, discussing with corporates, discussing with consumers, it's clear that the banks still, I would say, from a perception perspective, still own the security warranty of the entire services. What I'm trying to say here is whatever the financial service or the banking service, the fintech might be proposing to some clients, I mean, in the end, the perception from the customers is that the bank is owning the security, the security of the entire, I would say, system. And I must say, some of the fintech, especially, so I'm doing the distinction between what I call the big tech, so the GAFA, the Google, Amazon, Facebook, so the one coming with a very large installed base of customers with the agility of the infrastructure. From the fintech, so I'm more thinking about when I talk about the fintech, the startups that are coming to the market, leveraging, I would say, a specific regulation, taking advantage of the regulation, beneficiating from a special non-banking status, and in the end, coming with new creative ideas, but not necessarily with, I would say, the pre-existing infrastructure. So for them, the challenge is definitely to build an entire infrastructure to support the service that they want to promote, and it's not without any risk in terms of reliability and in terms of security. And all in all, with the risk, like I said, for the banks. Looking a bit more into how this is happening in the payment domain. So what you can see here is an example of a payment end-to-end value chain. It's a bit more card focused than payment focused. But what is interesting to note is that first, when you look at the new paradigm, so the local new paradigm, fintech and entrance, I mean, it clearly showcased that those fintech, those big techs, they are looking for, I would say, all areas to be explored. So not just focusing on one part of the value chain, but exploring new business opportunities on each part of the value chain. And interesting to note that there are even some, like PayPal, the Bitcoin initiative, that are even looking at creating their own ecosystem in a closed loop approach, and covering in the end the entire value chain. So this is good, I would say, illustration how much the industry is being disintermediated and disrupted. Talking a bit about strategy, because you might be saying now, and so what? What should I do? What should be the right strategy for my organization? Blah blah blah. I think. While we believe that complying is a careful and conservative place to be in order to wait and see and potentially also make sure that the industry is effectively moving there, as I said, we see it also as a risk. Our view is that the banks should look at it from both from a tactical and a strategical angles, and explore a more ambitious approach and consider to develop their digital platform in the end. Obvious strategy in general is very linked to an individual context. So that's why I think I would suggest raise two questions within your organization. The first one is how far away from its product and services traditional activities your organization is ready to go. I think it's the first question that should be raised internally. And the second one is how much your organization would be ready to disrupt its traditional business model. And I think there won't be any black or white answer, but I think that's, I would say, good questions to be raised to start, I would say, the strategic thought process required for that journey. I think something I already raised a bit, but worth to be mentioned once again is clearly, I'm more focusing on the fintech and not the big tech in that case. I think we must be fair here. There is clearly, and that's why I'm a bit back to the just comply position. We are clearly facing a risk of a bubble. I think everybody out there is, scratching on the market for the next Google, the next Facebook. So leveraging those, technological trends in the industry globally, and I'm not only referring to the APIs aspect of it. The risk is really, I would say, the promise of a new paradigm is not going to happen. So, and especially because, all those initiatives in the banking industry are heavily capital consuming. So with, I would say, a high level of expectation when it comes to break even, when it comes to how fast can I run a sustainable business. So all this is also applying a lot of pressures business-wise, which create a risk of a bubble that needs to be taken into account. I think maybe to close my thought on that slide and on the strategy aspect, I think one aspect to consider is definitely collaboration. It is clearly when you look at the fintech, especially, considering that most of them don't have the critical size, don't have the customers install base like the Amazon or the Google, but are coming with, I would say, valuable ideas, creative ideas, bringing value to banks' customers. Exploring collaboration model is definitely worth to do in that case. I would say helping to mitigate a bit the overall risk, having those new players disintermediating your bank, and obviously bringing, I would say, both parties bringing their assets to the parties, making the value proposition overall more profitable and less risky for end customers. My final thought is that I think you'll get it right. Let's not just embrace the digital platform journey because the whole industry is talking about it. I think yes, it should be part of any strategic consideration at the moment within the banks on the market. It's clear to plan as much as possible ahead. It's key to define the right positioning for your organization, and clear to also look at the execution aspect of it, because beyond the strategy, execution is the next hill to climb. Looking a bit at what does it mean in terms of technology. To us, it's all about the old versus the new. I would say I would raise that question: why replacing? And I heard many times that question talking with my clients. Why replacing a system that works, which is reliable, which is already secured, and while the maturity of the bank's infrastructure is very strong. I would say one aspect of the response is probably within the fact that yes, this infrastructure is very strong, but this infrastructure at the moment, in most of the cases, lack of agility, lack the ability to be highly interoperable, and I already said that is highly capital consuming. That does not mean that banks are not highly investing in the IT sector. Obviously, they are. The four key areas where we see banks investing are obviously first on the banking portal. I think it's clearly to address one of the top customer expectation, which is having a better customer experience, a better experience with my bank and with my banking portal, having a more personalized journey while I'm I would say using those services online. So that's one key area where banks are definitely investing in. The second one is obviously looking out the infrastructure model and how to leverage cloud infrastructure to get, I would say, some cost savings, and it's definitely a right angle. Cloud is definitely now becoming more than mature in the banking industry. We see more and more banks considering to go live with some critical element of their infrastructure in the cloud, which is a good indication that it's definitely moving there. The third one is definitely real time. I think the whole industry in all regions, actually Asia, Europe, and US, are moving to real time because it's becoming more than a customer expectation. It's almost becoming a customer given. What I'm trying to say here is that I would say the generation coming, that used to, I would say, use those WhatsApp, those means of communication that gives real-time access to information. I mean, it's definitely creating a generation that is taking given real-time as a given. So good to see that the industry is moving also to, I would say, create more real-time readiness to their legacy systems that are not ready, definitely not ready today. And last but not least, APIs. Definitely banks are investing on APIs. It's gonna be a way to facilitate the interoperability between all those parties playing the game. It's gonna help to standardize the way to interface with the bank, and it's gonna create more and more opportunities beyond the threat I mentioned for the banks. My closing thought, and I'll let you talk, Angie, is beyond the technology itself. It's also quite key to look at the organizational model, the operating model, because in the end it's good to have the state-of-the-art technology available to your organization, but if the organization does not have the right processes, does not have the right operating model in place to support this new technology life cycles, it's not going to be efficient. So we also see an opportunity for banks while embracing an API journey, a digital platform transformation journey, trying to also embrace the DevOps journey, which we see going in pair with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Just for a time check, we are about halfway through and we still have about 15 slides left, so I'll try to go through this a little bit quicker on my end so that we can get you out here on time. Michelle talked a lot about the digital transformations that banks are increasingly going through, and they are massive changes to organizations. He also highlighted the reliance on a new organizational or operating model, and we'll touch upon that. I saw a lot of questions too around the influences of GAFA and the implications on the banking industry and GAFA. I had to look it up. It's Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple. All of those huge, big, disruptive companies have changed for everybody else, regardless of industry, is that what is a standard around how responsive you are to change. Change today is the single most important factor in your survival and your success. If we look at the Fortune 500 companies of the last 30 years ago, 80% of them had the chance of lasting for more than 10 years. Today, only half of those companies on the Fortune 500 will last over 10 years. So you have as much of a chance of success as you do failure, and it's all going to be reliant on how quickly you're adapting to the new influences. But there are a lot of influences, especially and it creates a big strain on your IT resources. Specifically, when we look at the IT resources now and what they're working on, I mean, most of their effort is put on keeping the lights on. They're limited in that capacity. If 80% of it is spent on just running the business, running the systems, managing the applications to run the business, all these additional demands of cloud and SaaS, big data, analytics, mobile, digital competition, the new fintech emerging threats, those just keep compounding, and now what we end up with is this delivery gap. What are some of the solutions that you can do to address this? A lot of enterprises have adopted Agile, but Agile doesn't necessarily make the amount of work smaller. It's a different way of working, but it doesn't dictate what you're working on. It's more about how. The importance here is also what you're working on and making sure that you're prioritizing effectively, but also creating reusable assets and capabilities that are assets that can be consumed across an organization. Thankfully, there is a solution today. It's the modern API. This is the answer on the better thing to work on. This is the big change now that is enabling enterprises to adapt to change quicker. And for those of you who want that kind of context around what an API does, an API is a vehicle that moves data from one application to another. Because at the end of the day, when you're trying to get two systems to talk to each other, it's about the passing of information from one to another. But what differentiates banks from all of the other fintech disruptors out there is that they have this rich history of data and accounts and transactions that is really, their greatest asset, their competitive advantage. And they, banks should be working on digitizing those capabilities and using that to enhance that customer experience. Just to give you a sense of the pace of change, last year, the financial brand conducted a survey with global banks and credit unions, and last year, the top 10 priorities, within the top 10 priorities, APIs didn't even make that list. This year, it's number 4 out of 10, and if you actually look up the survey, you'll see that all of the other, most of the other top 10 items are actually related to APIs or enabled by APIs, removing friction from the customer journey, improvements in integrated multi-channel delivery, building partnerships between banking and fintech firms, the expansion of digital payments. All of these things can be automated. The information relied upon can be used more consistently, quicker through the use of APIs, which is such a great thing. How does this work conceptually? I talked a lot about not just working faster, but working on the right things to do. If I could use an analogy, I'll use the bicycle. Today, this is your system. It's the bicycle, and the IT has spent a lot of effort on working with the business to gather all of the business requirements over tens of hundreds of pages, and they'll build all the parts. Then other demands come for additional systems, 2 more other bikes. Now you have 3. Does IT then build these bikes on their own? Not necessarily, because if you actually look at the makeup of a bike, there are certain things that are pretty consistent and reusable across these vehicles, right? You can take the wheel, build one wheel, and that wheel can be used for multiple system bikes. You can build a pedal, you can build handles, and when you're creating those things that are basic building blocks of a larger capability or platform, you're then able to shift IT's time and resources and focus away from just rebuilding or building the ground and really focus and helping them build a bike that looks more like a motorcycle. So the answer is the building blocks. If I think of this from a banking perspective and make it relevant to you, you think about all the projects that you're kicking off for digital transformation. Let's take, for example, a new customer onboarding experience. You also want to enhance your loan origination process, so you're going through loan origination system replacements. You also want to build a wealth management portal so that your customers can be able to see their retail accounts on the same page with their wealth management accounts and be able to transfer money in between, et cetera, et cetera. If you think about something that could be common among just those 3 large-scale projects, an example would be the process you run to grab pieces of customer information, right? That's the single reusable asset, the capability for your bank to gather the relevant information that will map that customer correctly to their accounts. That same information could be used, or additional information, supplemental information could be used to combine that customer information along with other things to then analyze the risk of them defaulting on a loan. You could also take the customer information and supplement it with additional demographic data or sources of wealth and couple it with the transactions that they have in their accounts to look for any money laundering indicators. At the basis of it, you're seeing a theme, a trend of customer being repeated across these projects, right? And so why wouldn't your IT teams talk to each other and make sure that this is being defined in a consistent way, but also relied upon and consumed? So putting that process on paper is the digitization of that capability, and now becomes your asset. So these building blocks you can then start putting on top of each other to create something bigger and better, so that your enterprise is aligned and can react to change faster, because you're able to identify the foundational smaller pieces that need to be adapted if some change does come up, rather than breaking down the entire bike and then rebuilding it over again. But what does that mean? It takes a mindset or a platform that not only produces the right capability, you also want to make sure that it is written down on paper, formalized in a logical format in pieces of code, which is your API, your reusable asset. But just as importantly as production is consumption. If I'm a writer and I want to write the next best book, I know there's a library available to me, but I need to make sure that I know what's in the library so that I'm not writing the same book. But if I am writing a book, maybe there's something in the library that already talks about some of the subjects that I would want to include in some of my chapters. So I would want to go in and be able to leverage that information and bring it into the relevant chapters of my book to make so that I'm writing my book faster and better, and it's going to market quicker. At the same time, your platform, you want a tool that not only helps you manage your production, you're creating assets, you're making them discoverable and self-service and consumed through self-service. You also want standardization and governance around who is using them, how they're being used, where that data is going. You also want to be able to incorporate any changes to let's say security around who has access to that data. You want a centralized place to be able to influence all of that, as well as capturing metrics on how well these assets are doing, because who knows, maybe you'll come across assets that are similar in some way, but you're finding that one asset is being used 90% while the other is 10%. So that's an opportunity for you all for the organization to come together and identify the preferred approach. On that note, this is not just about technology. Michelle talked about this being an organizational model, an operating model. Technology is not enough. The beauty of an API-led connectivity or ecosystem is that it can start from the ground up, and it starts from the ground up because it serves the business's purpose. But for them to really get value out of that platform, you want to make sure that there is an appropriate process for them to be able to produce your assets in a consistent way, but also be able to identify, discover, and consume them. So at the beginning of each project, your developers should be thinking, is there already an asset? Should we be creating one? You would look into MuleSoft offers a product called Exchange where you can publish these assets and be able to find it. Project number 2 then would then follow the same process, and project after project, you're only creating net new items, and your inventory assets gets bigger and bigger. And so the shift of your IT teams from the focus shifts from just building things over and over to now just innovating. You obviously have the technology where you want to have that single go-to place to enable that process of production and discoverability, but also that guarantees security. For MuleSoft, the product is it's secure and governed by design. Every little asset API that you're creating comes with security parameters, and it's auditable, and you're able to see where the data is going. So even if you build APIs on top of APIs, you're still able to maintain that governance and security with it. Lastly, I mentioned before, if you want to have that feedback loop at the end of it to evaluate, are we creating the assets in the best way possible? And that really involves bringing together a cross-functional team, not just IT. This isn't just a center of excellence where you're bringing the best and the brightest together. Granted, in what we like to think of it as a center for enablement, you are still bringing the best and the brightest together, though this is about a balanced, a multidisciplinary group that is really bringing together perspectives from the business and technology to make sure that that partnership between businesses and IT is maximized, and everybody is doing the right thing that's the best for the organization. Not only is it about looking at the assets and the platform, but it's also about enabling the organization so that you are allowing everybody, empowering everybody to use the tool. It's about training, it's about thinking strategically, it's about creating a culture of production and consumption and reuse. Just because I know that the library is there, I'm not going to want to go there proactively unless, all of my my peers and my experts are all telling me that I need to go there too. It's all behaviors as well. So think of this as a bigger effort than just technology. With any transformation, there are organizational considerations. It requires a balance of people, process, and technology. So what does this do then to that picture that I mentioned to you earlier? If we have that IT delivery capacity here at the bottom, you are able to shift that capacity or fill that capacity with assets that have already been created. So that actually turns into enablement and assets. And so that, I talk about that shift from focusing on, recreating, now that's turning into consumption and innovating. Your organization is now empowered to work on things that are really pushing the boundaries of what customer experience looks like, what the loan origination process looks like, how you can better predict fraud monitoring through your analytics and business intelligence tools. Now, if you guys are all probably looking for an example of how this works, and we've got some for you. This is a payments example, but again, we can apply this in all areas across the bank. And this is just to show you kind of how we think through the APIs and how they're designed and built and interact with each other. At the bottom layer here, you have what we call system APIs. These are the APIs that the central IT group uses to unlock the assets in your core systems of record. They're making data sets available. So if on the left side, you might have accounts, all your checking savings account, you unlock that through your accounts information API. You have demographic information about your customers in Salesforce. You may have loans. You may have social data. Those system APIs are used then to make that key valuable information available. And what it does is it shields, the rest of the organization from having to know the entire code base of the system of record, because those can be very, very complicated. I mean, I've been with clients that have countless resources just dedicated to maintaining a system of record, and responding to data requests or reporting requests. So open up their capacity and create this API to unlock that information for them. Then you have the process APIs, which are then serving for the line of business. Lines of businesses then take the pieces of data from the source systems of records and they manipulate it to meet their own needs. So what you're doing in this layer is that you're composing the assets and you're turning data into valuable information. It's becoming your asset. And then the third layer is then your experience APIs. Depending on whether you are giving customer information to your employee or a desktop or a mobile application, that presentation format might be different. So what this allows you to do is, say you're not happy with your mobile vendor or your desktop vendor, or you want to switch your employee portal. You keep the process and the system APIs intact, the way you unlock that information from your source systems of record, the process to which you aggregate that data and calculate or bring together all the information to bring that information to a user interface. But all you have to do is change the front end. You're not bogged down by your commitment or your the requirement to break all of the linkages down between that customer-facing portal or the employee-facing portal to all of the other applications. You're really just centralizing that change. So the effort of your IT team is significantly reduced. So how does this reuse then come into play? Say you wanted to add a mobile channel, and you wanted to integrate a funds processor API. On this example, we have customer API and then a payments API, and now you want to introduce another function that relies on a funds processor API. You're able to reuse these existing process APIs partly, and there should be a line between the funds processor API and the system APIs, because the funds processor, then you don't have to create necessarily new linkages to all of the systems of record. You're able to look at the assets that are created that have already unlocked that data for you and just plugging and playing, just bringing in what you need and really accelerating that time that you are spending to build these integrations. And one thing to note here is that the more projects that you have added, I mentioned before, this is a bottoms-up approach to serve the business's needs. The more projects you add to your what we call application network, or your inventory of your digitized capabilities or assets, the faster you're able to work. It accelerates the responsiveness of your IT teams and your ability to innovate. The other beauty of this type of approach is that it really brings together an enterprise. It breaks down silos. If you look at the screen here, I use somewhat similar examples, somewhat new, just to show you kind of the relevance of banking, our relevance into banking. But let's say that you have a mobile app that you're building and you want to be able to display a payment confirmation. Payment confirmation, to get to that point, you're not just having to initiate a payment or record a payment. You also want to make sure that you're mapping them to the correct customer, and you're also authenticating that customer, the right customer who has the rights to make that transfer. If you think about just those processes or capabilities, it really brings together not just your retail banking line of business. You want to bring in your enterprise functions around data management to make sure that it's lined up with the standard approach for defining customers. And once that customer identifier capability is set, you can use that consistently across all of the other organizations within your enterprise that rely on that information. So now your data quality is being improved. You're also working with information and security to integrate the right entitlements or the security standards that your bank is interested in. And not only that, you're applying it consistently across you're building it once and applying it consistently across all of the consumers in your organization, rather than having to recode that functionality every time there's a system project initiated. Fraud, anti-money laundering can also be brought in the picture. Anytime you have a transaction, you want to record it, and I look at those patterns to make sure that there isn't any fraudulent behavior, and you're able to then connect that to a proactive alert and monitoring system. It really does bring the entire organization together, which is, I think, just such a powerful thing, especially given how much banks struggle with this in my experience. So bringing it full circle, we talked a lot about fintechs and emerging threats. What does this mean then to the experience? and Michelle also talked about the value chain and how each stage of the value chain is being challenged by new fintech. This is a slide I like to present because our CEO, Greg Schott, shared this with us at one of our summits. Somebody took the landing page of a banking portal and mapped the functionality to all of the financial technologies out there that either are competing, biting at the ankles of the banks to take over their market share, or are creating a new way to do it, but they don't have that rich data that banks do. So, think of it as maybe you don't necessarily have to create that functionality in-house. You can create an API to make the data that you need to to enable a function to work available, but bring in that functionality, the capability around to make that customer experience beautiful of a fintech partner. So APIs then not only become a tool to unlock your assets and bring all your lines of businesses and your functions together, but it then becomes a means to which you can start working together with what you thought were once threats. I'm seeing more and more my clients building beautiful customer portals and then not relying on one online or mobile provider to build that portal for them and then connect to all their backend systems. If they're not happy with the functionality that one of their online provider builds or offers, then they'll go out and find a different fintech vendor who can do it better, and use an API to bring that into the experience so that the experience seems consistent and is in line with the bank's differentiated experience. So, this really opens the door to how creative you can be and the innovative experiences that you can extend to your customers. It's great. And before I close and pass it back to Michelle for the customer story and the additional resources, I'll just say that really quickly that this is about building a digital banking platform, and maybe the face is that website, the landing page that I showed you, or maybe it's a developer portal. You're creating this space for others people inside your organization or others outside your organization to come in and leverage those assets that you have created. So it also requires a difference in mindset. In the past, a traditional product was what your product was, and now you have to think of APIs as your product. Every person now has to behave and act and think like a product manager and think about how will this serve my business. You're also thinking about how your business is evolving. So I won't go through and read all of these, but think about how much this touches your organization and changes the way you think your processes, how you operate. Okay, Michelle. Customer story.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. So yeah, sorry, oops. Sorry for that. Yeah, so we thought it was good to give you an overview of an implementation that we jointly did with MuleSoft. Implementation of an open banking platform for a large international bank. And we thought, I would say, was good to share the main takeaways of that experience. Essentially, the benefits of that experience, and I would say the best practices that we see. I've seen a couple of questions from you guys today asking about best practices to implement APIs. I think I'll provide one aspect of the answer to you. So basically, looking at the benefits of this API platform that we have implemented, there are three, I would say, aspects to to highlight. The first one is it definitely helps the bank to hide the complexity of their legacy system, and that's most of the time something we don't immediately realize talking about APIs, because talking about APIs, we look at, I would say, the external world, so how to interact with my customers, how to interact with third parties. But an API platform can also definitely help to hide the complexity of your backend system, and ultimately can help to potentially decommission some of the components in your backend system. So the way we see it is that an API platform can be a tactical platform first, enabling you to also achieve a core banking transformation journey, for instance. So that's one aspect that definitely has been a benefit for our clients. The second aspect is has it brought a new and easy way to interact with the bank. It also gives, especially to third parties, I'm focusing especially on the third parties there, give the third party an easy way to connect to the bank. And I would say to go beyond, the complexity of getting their services, their solution integrated with the bank backend system, which can be a pain sometimes. And it definitely enabled those third party to focus at how to get the maximum value out of that integration capability that now is available, more than how I'm gonna integrate to that system. And the last one is obviously the fact that it helps to standardize the way to interface to the bank. Obviously, helping especially corporate customers of the bank, and also helping those customers to achieve a cost challenge that they have dealing with multiple ways to integrate with multiple banks. The next step in that journey, so the platform is live now. The next step in that journey is how to leverage the platform to go beyond the platform and start building an entire ecosystem around the platform. So exposing a developer portal, creating a marketplace, and start, I would say, achieving a growth by onboarding customers and third parties within the same ecosystem. It's a very, very, very nice experience that we have. Happy to share much more details if you guys would like to be continued, obviously. The next slide I'd like to talk, and that will be the very last one, is, and I'm gonna make it short as far as I can. Best practices and approach. I've seen that question. How should I implement? What's the best step, the best way to implement an API? I think first it should be no rush. It should be, I think I said that already, shaping the right business case, making sure that there is the proper roadmap supporting the business case, making sure that there is also a transformation program supporting from an operating model that API journey are, I would say, key prerequisites. Then the journey is going to be an incremental journey made of several steps. I think one of the key first steps is definitely look at how can I get the maximum value out of my API, so the APIs I'm going to expose, and how I'm gonna monetize those APIs. And ideally, those APIs should be, I would say, top of the list in terms of APIs that needs to be developed on the platform, because they are going to give immediate value, immediate profit to the bank, and we know that it's really key for the shape of a project, and also from an overall business case perspective, is heavily budget consuming. So it needs to have quick wins. It needs to have clear, tangible results as fast as possible. And then the cycle is an obvious cycle that you are going to enter in, which is involving as soon as possible your customers to get their feedback, because if you remember well, at the beginning of the presentation I said, whatever the technology, whatever the trend we are talking about, the judge of peace is going to be the client, is going to be your customers. Are they going to find the value out of the use cases that they will be able to implement thanks to your API platform? And it's quite key to get their feedback while working and being agile enough to take into account their feedback to potentially adjust your project roadmap. So overall, this is what I wanted to share with you guys in terms of how to implement an API and some of the best practices that we can highlight today. There are many more, obviously. Thank you. Angie, I don't know. Angie?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was looking at the questions that I received. I saw one around complexity. I thought that would be interesting to answer. It says, with regard to complexity, do you mean business lines or bank size? In my case, I'm wondering specifically about small community banks looking to create their own retail and business banking platforms. And when I say complexity, my response would be that complexity is both to the number of business lines as well as bank size, but it also with respect to the number of systems you use, how the systems are integrated, if they're point to point, there's a lot of spaghetti code on the back of it, that becomes a lot more difficult to break or fix. How manual your processes are, how varied your lines of businesses are with respect to how they calculate things, how they do things. But what I will say is that I think small community banks do have a huge disadvantage in that their complexities obviously are not going to be as grand as those, top 10 global banks. One of my clients, who is a top 10 global bank, they were looking to enhance their loan origination system, and just within the loan application and evaluation process, there were 4,000 systems involved. That's a very complex environment, and they were able to, through this API-led approach of the system experience or system process experience APIs, they were able to create some consistency and streamlineness, if that's a word. They were able to streamline a lot of that and also integrate a lot of redundant systems. So I would say that, going back to my response, small community banks are at a huge advantage because they don't have as much complexity. And the earlier you are able to build that banking platform and get your capabilities digitized, as you grow and scale, you're set up that much better to succeed, and you're able to respond much more quicker, and you have the foundations, the basic foundational capabilities to respond to all of the new forces and influences that are coming out of the big digital, non-financial services influencers these days. Is there another question maybe, Michelle, that you might want to answer? Otherwise, I think we are. Oh yeah, I'll let you.
No, I think we are a bit late. Yeah.
I'll say I do see one actually, a really good question, and I'll close with this one. Again, the webinar is recorded and will be made available shortly after this, so by all means, feel free to listen to anything for clarification at your leisure at the same links where you joined this webinar. Also, feel free to reach out and ask any questions personally. I think our contact information here. So the last question is, with regards to implementation with bank, can you share top 3 challenges faced by you? Just out of experience, I'd say, large digital transformation is very hard, and knowing where to start is also something that is challenging. So being able to prioritize, the efforts is one thing. So looking for those projects that have the biggest bang for their buck, the greatest chance of producing those reusable assets. A large digital transformation doesn't have to be, 100 projects that's all at the same time. And also the beauty of building that banking platform is that you start anywhere. You can start in one customer onboarding project. You can start with one loan origination process, one payments project. And if you need assistance with that, MuleSoft does have a methodology for delivering on those digital transformations, as well as Capgemini with their comprehensive approach to building a digital platform. I'd also say that the organizational enablement is also a big challenge. And third would be probably just getting everybody to actually use and consume, and getting in the mindset of reusing and not just rebuilding code, because it's faster for them to just code something than to actually go out and do the research and find what's already out there. Hope that answers the question. Anything else? Okay. Thank you all very much for your time. Michelle, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Have a nice day.